Okay, we are rolling. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Scott.
What's your name?
Mike.
Mike what?
Mike Harris.
And what day is it today?
It is Beatle Day, November 19th, 1995.
Wow. And how old are you?
Oh, 39.
39. Because we're both going to be 40 next February.
That's right.
God, I can't even believe that. So something fun happened to you on Friday.
Yes.
It started out with a project you were working on with Cindy Lee Berryhill, right?
Right.
So why don't you just start with the end of that and lead up to why you're going up to LA and all that. Just tell me about it.
Well, we were up in LA at Bernie Grundman's to master her record, which is the new album on Cargo Records coming out soon. And
where's Bernie Grundman's place?
It's on Sunset Boulevard, right next to Ocean Way, which is a pretty famous studio up there. Just a few blocks west of 101. So it was late afternoon. Bernie had pretty much been through the record. He had got all his EQs set, and he was starting to go ahead and do the transfer. And so at that point, I was just kind of walking around. And I went down the street and got something from the local, liquor store, just something to drink. And I was actually walking back to the studio, and I see Cindy walking toward me on the street, and she has kind of a funny look on her face. So she says, Bernie just told me that the Beach Boys were recording at Ocean Way for the last couple of days.
Hadn't you hypothetically brought something like that up in front of Bernie?
Yeah, because in front of Bernie?
Yeah.
Not in front of Bernie. I talked to Cindy about it.
Okay, hold on a second. No, don't hold on. Okay.
Of course, being me and Cindy were talking about the Beach Boys on the way up because we're both big fans. And I said, we were talking about what the next step for Brian should be. And I said, well, the greatest thing that could happen would be if Brian got back with the Beach Boys. They recorded an album with Don Was and Andy Paley, producing. And because there's been some discussion, and I've seen interviews with Don Was and Brian, and Don Was seemed to be part of that scenario. If they got back together, he would be there.
Right.
So anyway, I said that would be perfect because Don Was has a good ear for production, and he's great. And I don't know if Andy and the Beach Boys alone would work out as well. They need somebody who really knows how to steer the record in the right direction.
Andy's an engineer.
Andy's a writer and a musician.
Not an engineer.
Not an engineer.
Right.
But him and Brian wrote all these songs together. And he's like one of Brian's best friends.
Since when?
I guess they've been working together since before the solo album. Okay. He was involved in the solo album.
Or so.
Yeah.
So Bernie has got the levels. He hasn't started mastering yet, but he kind of got his little high points that he needs.
Yeah.
And Cindy's kind of walking out of Grundman to the left, right? As you walk out of...
Yeah.
Okay.
She was walking down Sunset, going west on Sunset. I was going east.
With a...
going back to...
can of beer in a paper bag.
No, I had a cookie. I was eating a cookie.
Okay.
So anyway, she says, so Bernie tells me they're recording next door, and I said, oh, cool. And he didn't know right then. He just said they've been there for the last few days. And she goes, so I'm going to go over there. And my first reaction was, oh, you crazy? They're not going to let you in. I mean, you got to buzz to get in the front door. Then you got to try to get back to if they're even there.
What was your feeling at that time? What was your emotional feeling? Like adrenaline, or were you just kind of going, ah?
Well, it was like the chances of them being there are pretty slim, but even if they are, we probably won't get in.
Okay. So it was more of an intellectual quantifying your odds as opposed to some emotional reaction.
But I got a little bit excited. I had the similar feeling when we were going up toward the door that I had when I was going up to Frank's house, that I can't believe I'm doing this, but we're going to give it a shot. So we pushed the buzzer. They let us in. We walk in, and a couple of people sitting at the front desk, and she says, is David Leaf in today? David Leaf is now Brian's manager, but he's formerly a big Beach Boy historian who's written several books, and he's written the liner notes for the Beach Boys box set and the double CDs, the two first that came out. So he's part of that circle. So anyway, she asks if David Leaf is there, and they say, who is he with? And she says, he would be with Brian. And the guy kind of looks down at the schedule and says, "Oh, the Beach Boy guys," and she goes, "Yes."
I'll call him back.
He goes, "Oh, the Beach Boy guys?" And she goes, "Yes." And he acted like he didn't even know if the Beach Boys were in the studio. He said, "Well, I'm not really sure. You can walk back and see if they're in there."
And this is like a guy that was really young or didn't seem to care about the significance of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was, just a desk guy, a front desk guy. So we start walking down the hall.
So how are you feeling now?
Feeling like I'm amazed that they actually said you guys can go down there. But at that point, I still didn't know if they were in there, and I kind of thought, they're not going to be back there. We're going to walk back, and some session is going to be going on, and they'll say, "Who are you?" So we're walking down the hall, and Cindy kind of looks back at me and smiles, and she's in front of me. We get a little further down the hall, and then we hear the sound of unmistakably Beach Boy vocals.
Coming through a control room, an open control room door?
Open door, yeah.
Yeah.
We can't see anything because you have to go around the corner.
How do you feel then?
Then it was like Cindy turns around and goes, "That's them? Is that them?" And I go, "That's definitely them." At that point, it was like full adrenaline. Are they going to throw us out? So we walk up. Cindy immediately walks right into the control room and leans over and starts talking to Audrey. I don't know, why she just kind of leaned in and she was like leaning over. So when she leaned over, Andy Paley could see me, and he looked at me like kind of a quizzical, "Yes, can I help you? What do you?"
So he's not facing the studio. He's facing the door.
He turned sideways to his left, and he's looking out the studio door. The studio door is like right there, and the glass to look into the studio is right there.
At a right angle. It's not behind the glass, it's to the side of the glass.
Right. So
and Audrey is?
Audrey was seated just inside the studio door, like right here.
But she is? Who is
Audrey is Brian's mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she kind of just immediately goes into a little huddle with Audrey.
Yeah,
okay.
And said hi. She was saying hi. So when Andy looked at me, he like, "What are you doing here? Or who are you?" or whatever. I said, "I'm with Cindy," and I pointed at Cindy, and then he saw Cindy, and it was like, "Then hi, oh, how you doing?" So Cindy's inside the control room at that point, and Andy just kind of turned around and went back to whatever they were doing, and I was standing outside, and Cindy kind of waved me in. So I peeked my head around the corner of the door. And out in the studio, on the right side, is Carl standing in front of a microphone. In the center is a kind of a tall guy with long blonde hair who is Al Jardine's son, I found out. And over on the left, and I can barely see him, but I kept peeking around, was Brian, seated with a mic kind of hanging down. And so they were doing background parts for this song called Mystery to Me, or She's a Mystery, something like that. And it was like the end of the song where everything kind of calms down, similar to like what you might expect to hear on the Pet Sounds, where things kind of slow down to a stop, and then, then all the drums come back in and they all start going ba 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 da da, So they were doing this thing and they were having trouble because there was a count on the tape. You could hear them go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's where the band comes in. But they had to start singing right after the first one. Not on the downbeat of the music, but before the downbeat.
One,
yeah, one da 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 bob. It kind of led in. So they were having a problem with that, and they they kept trying to, like Brian was coming in at the wrong time, or they all weren't coming in at the right time.
So there's 3 people doing vocals in the studio.
Yeah, 3 people being mixed down to 1 track, and I think they stacked it after that.
How big is the actual recording studio itself? The studio part. How far apart are these guys?
They were probably about, I'd say 10 feet apart, each one. They were in a line like this, center, and Brian was over on the left.
And they're each wearing headphones. Are they looking at each other? Or are they just concentrating?
They're just kind of looking straight into the control room.
Are they bantering with each other?
Not really. They were just talking to the control room. Mostly it was Brian at that point talking to Andy about the timing. And so they just said, "Could you just turn up the counting a little bit more for us so we can hear that?" Okay. So they did that about 3 times. Tried to do it about 3 times, and then they got it, and they went to the end of the song. Then they went back and doubled it, and they didn't have any really problem coming in. They knew it at that point. So.
Okay, so let me back up for a sec. Tell me who's in the room. in the control room with you.
Okay, in the control room is Andy Paley.
Where is he?
He's seated behind the console. To the right of him is a guy named Rick Picconen, who was the engineer, who at that point I didn't know who he was. And then there was a second engineer kind of back in the corner who had the remote control for the multi-track, and he was doing all the punching and rewinding and everything.
And this is a digital multi-track?
Yeah, it was a 48-track digital.
Okay.
So a little to the left of Andy was Don Was, who was, another producer, of course. And next to me, standing next to me, I was sort of right in the doorway at that point, was a guy who I've later realized was Carl Wilson's son. Audrey had another older lady next to her who was just a friend of hers who came along, I think. And then Cindy was in there too.
Wow.
So I think that's all the people that were in there at that point.
Okay.
So
So
they finished kind of what they were doing, and they were coming back into the control room. And I remember Cindy said, "Oh, it sounds really good." And Don West turns around and goes, "Yeah, but you haven't even heard all the stuff yet." Then they bring on a bunch more background parts. So all these interweaving background things are going on with high falsetto woos and, the typical Beach Boy thing.
Right.
And we were just going, this is unbelievable.
And you found out this is only day 2?
Yes. Later on, talking to Melinda, who's Brian's new wife, she said they just started this yesterday.
So she wasn't in the control room at the time you were?
I don't think she was there. I think she came a little bit later.
Okay, and you're thinking you're going to get kicked out at any time?
Yeah, of course. I thought it was going to be like, well, Cindy, it was nice to see you. Thanks for coming by, but we really got to get back to work here, and we can't, we've got a lot of people in here already. It was a small control room. It was kind of crowded.
And so your emotional state at this point is what?
Just in disbelief, I mean, I was stunned.
You said for the first couple of minutes you were just paralyzed?
Yeah, I was just emotional almost,
And how were you? Okay, wait, I'm going to get back to the camera. Show me how you were standing. You can stand up.
Okay, well, I was just kind of standing at the door like this, and trying to not make any false move, or I might make a distraction that somebody might say, "Oh, there's a noisy back there," or anything like that.
All right.
So at that point, they finished their background parts, and they came into the control room to listen. And nobody really acknowledged us. We were just some other people who had shown up. Then they started talking about another song and discussing what they should do next. And they said, "Okay, put up Soul Searching."
And how big is the room, the control room?
Well, with all the stuff in there wasn't much room. I mean, if you were seated at the console, there was about 6 feet between the console and the back of the room where there was some tape machines. So there was just a small area, 6 to 8 feet, and I'd say the room was about 20 feet wide. But at one end of it, there was some outboard gear, so that took up some room.
Right.
So there literally wasn't enough room for me. If they had brought a chair in, I couldn't have put a chair and sat down because we stood almost just inside the doorway.
I see.
For most of the time.
You're the only person who's standing.
Cindy was standing.
Okay.
Carl's son was standing. Don was standing most of the time. He was back and forth. He would take phone calls, and he was barefooted. I remember that. He was just really casual. Didn't say too much. They all had lyric sheets, and they were all marking down,
And this is for the
different
first song
phrases.
or the second song?
This is still for the first song.
Okay.
But so anyway, they got the second song up.
So the first song, also, Brian is kind of, who's in control?
Well, the first song, Brian's singing.
Right.
So it was Don Was and Andy who were in control. Andy seemed to be doing most of the talking.
Okay.
But Don Was, on listening back, Don Was would say, "Let's do that line again," or "Let's do this again."
So maybe Don would be like the final quality control guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, they got up to the next song. At this point, Brian was in the control room sitting right in front of me. I mean, I could have reached out like this and grabbed his shoulder. Whose
chair did he take?
There was a chair there.
Okay.
It's just kind of like a chair for him, I
Okay.
guess.
Did Brian walk? He walks out of the studio and into the control room. Does he acknowledge anybody?
He was just talking to Andy, and
Didn't say hi to his mom.
I don't remember him saying anything at that point, but
Didn't say hi to you.
no.
Okay.
They put the next song up, and Carl gets ready to do a lead vocal on it. I didn't know what he was going to do, but that's what he ended up
So
doing.
Carl's the only guy left in the studio
Yeah, Carl
Same
had come
mic.
in, but he went back out there.
to his same mic.
No, he went to a different mic. They put him on the center microphone. He had previously been on the right-hand microphone. Now he goes to the center mic.
Which is a
It was a Neumann M49, which is a big fat tube mic that looks like if you took a U87 and cut it in half and expanded it about twice as big.
same volume but different configuration.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. And the other two vocal mics, same.
Same mics, yeah.
Okay.
So I think the second went out there and readjusted something, so he could sing.
They use a windscreen like the nylon thing, or
Yeah, a ring with a nylon,
Right, okay.
the typical thing. So when they first rolled the tape, there was a bunch of background parts on there that he didn't want to hear, and
Carl.
yeah, that Carl said turn those off, and it was kind of funny because I was relating it to if I had been in there working, it would have been like I would have known exactly where the parts were, and I would have pulled the faders down and said, okay, but they started running through the song, and he started singing it, and then he stopped him and said, turn those background parts off. Well, it took him it seemed like forever, like 10 minutes, to figure out where those parts were on the tape so they could get rid of them.
On a 48-track digital tape.
Yeah.
And is this the first engineer who's doing this finding, or the
Both
second?
of them, they were both looking around for it. They kept pulling down things, and the second had a set of headphones on because apparently they were feeding the singers a different mix than what we were hearing in the control room. Like a lot of times when I do vocals, they're hearing my mix. So if they need fine adjustments, I can just push the faders around to
Right.
give them what they want, and I can hear the result immediately. But in this case, the second engineer had to use headphones and go through, and he goes, well, try this over here. And they try to turn those down, and he would go, I'm still hearing them. So the engineer said, well, just give us a couple of minutes. So they were rolling, like playing the song from top to bottom, looking and trying to adjust the balances.
Okay.
Then when they finally got it figured
Are
out,
you referring to a track sheet here?
I was thinking that too, but I didn't really see them looking at a track sheet. It was almost like the track sheet just said vocals or something. They didn't say which background vocals. It's like intertwining parts. Something comes in, something goes out, that kind of thing.
So finally,
they got it that way, and then Carl goes, well, I was wrong. I do need this one part in. So they put this other part back in.
easily, or
Yeah, they didn't take too much time, but it did take several minutes for them to get this. I remember there was a slightly uncomfortable period where Carl was just like waiting.
Mike standing there at parade rest.
Yeah, right. So finally they get it, and he sings the song like he knows the song by heart. I mean, he's looking at lyrics. He made a couple of comments that he kept complaining about the printout of the lyrics wasn't big enough for him to really read very easily. He wanted a bigger type.
Is this the song that somebody asked Brian if he wrote?
Yeah, this happens later.
Okay, sorry.
This is the song called Soul Searching,
Okay.
which they worked on for the rest of the time that I was there. So anyway, he sings the song. He probably gets about halfway through it, and I think, and he stops and he makes another comment about the headphones. And he says in the verses, it's like kind of a soft part, and then it goes to like the bridge and chorus, and he sings louder. So
all the background vocals are tracked. It's just the lead vocal that remains to be done.
a lot of them are tracked. As I found out later, they still added some more, but most of them were there. But he had them take out a lot of them so he could do this. But anyway, so he makes another comment about the phones. He wants them to turn it up in the headphones during the verses and down in the choruses.
The whole mix, or that one?
Just his voice. And he had to ask them about 3 times to do that because they kept forgetting it. Nobody was over there doing it while the song was playing, while I was recording. And at one point, Don was asked, do you want me to do this? And the engineer goes, well, you can't because you have to be able to hear it. So the second wearing phones had to do it so he could tell how much he was moving. So anyway...
So what's the instrumentation on this track?
On this track, it sounded like a couple of guitars. There was a piano, bass, and drums. Didn't sound like any synthesizers.
Okay.
It's like a 50s R&B.
And who's calling the shots?
They both were pretty much. I mean, they were...
Carl and...
Well, Andy and Don.
Okay, and Brian is just sitting there.
Brian was just kind of sitting there.
Okay.
So after he runs through it about 2 times, they like a lot of it. You know, they go, oh, this sounds great, you know. So then they start listening down and just marking out lines, you know. And they'll play a little bit, and then
they'll have the same lyric sheets that Carl does?
Yeah. And they play a little bit, and, you know, they'll listen for a little bit and stop, and somebody might say, well, let me get that one part again, or let me do the first, I want to do the first line, like Carl, I think he said, I want to do the first opening line one more time.
So it's punching and punching in?
Yeah, it was a simple procedure. It was like, you know, it wasn't this complicated thing where they do like 5 tracks of lead vocal and then bounce them all down. It was just, he sang the song about 3 times, they went through and punched a few lines that were off. Some of them they had to punch like about 4 times to get it right.
Did you agree with, did it all fit your instincts in terms of what was good and what wasn't?
Yeah, although I didn't hear anything that was really bad, but it, you know, Carl would go, I think I sharped a little on that last line, let's listen back, and you know. And as they went on, Brian got more involved and he started giving Carl ideas about phrasing and stuff, you know, like, you know, leave a pause here before you come in, or, you know, a little more expression. At one point he said, make it more ethereal. And Carl was like, yeah, no problem, Brian, you know, whatever.
So what's Carl's demeanor during this?
Very calm, very cool. He was just like, you know, really professional, real mellow.
You said before you thought his attitude was, okay, Brian, I'm here to serve my brother Brian, and I'm just going to do the...
Yeah, yeah.
Describe that.
Yeah, well, he wasn't, you know, he wasn't... He was real cooperative with everything Brian would suggest. There was no, you know, what's the word?
No rivalry.
Yeah, there was no tension at all. It wasn't like, well, no, I thought that line was okay. I mean, you really want me to do it again? And there were a couple of times where Brian made him change something, and then later on, well, one specific thing, he made him change the phrasing of a line, and then like 10 minutes later, they were listening, and Brian stopped right there at that line and said, no, do it this way, and he made him change it back to the original way, and Carl was like, okay, now that's the line we changed a little while ago, and you want me to go back to the old way? And Brian's like, yeah, go back the way it was.
Is it a phrasing change or a melody change?
It was a phrasing change. A couple of melody changes here and there, but there were a couple of things where Brian, you know, everybody thought it was okay, but Brian said, no, change it this way, and when they changed it, everybody went, oh yeah, cool, you know, and it was like, it was Brian was there in tune with what was going on, and he was picking out stuff that nobody else would have really thought was a problem. It wasn't something that was a mistake. It was just that he would change the phrasing a little bit, and it would sound better when he did.
So you thought that your take when he changed Carl and then changed it back again was he was checking it out. It wasn't like he lost track.
At first, I thought he had lost track because you know I knew that that's the line they had changed, but.
Right.
I think it was just a case of him hearing it again and deciding it didn't quite sound right. So I don't know if he actually remembered that how they had changed it or what they had done with it, but he knew that it wasn't what he wanted yet, and so he said, no, do it like this, and the way he said to do it was the way it had been done previously.
So the mood in the control room was pretty relaxed.
Oh yeah, and everybody, every now and, you know, he would turn around and go, hey, Mom, how's it sound, you know? Oh, it sounds wonderful, Brian. And then, you know, every now and then somebody would really get excited about something Carl sang, and, you know.
So there's a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, a lot of enthusiasm. And Brian would go, it's a goddamn good record, man. This is going to be great, you know. Or when Carl cussed a couple of times on the mic, I mean, he, you know, like, oh, sorry, Mom, you know.
The guy's 58 years old or something. So what's Carl wearing? What does he look like?
Just like a cotton shirt, like a pullover shirt, and casual.
Was he have a closely cropped, like, gray beard still?
Yeah, he looked exactly like he does in the I Wasn't Made for These Times
Still
TV.
kind of heavy?
Yeah.
And what about Brian?
Brian looked good. I mean, he looked kind of like he did in the film, but a little more.
Which
It
film?
was like in the I Just Wasn't Made for These Times.
Where he kind of has that Peter Boyle, Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yeah, but he looked better to me than he did when I saw him the night of the film premiere, because I went up there to see that film premiere and he was there. He looked better then in the studio than he did that day. I don't know what it was about him, but he was just more relaxed, and he didn't see there was none of that weird feeling that you get when you see him on TV when he's like talking kind of out of his head and you have a hard time understanding him, and
Like in the Theremin movie?
Yeah, right, like in the Theremin movie. When the average person would look at him and go, did he have a stroke or something? He was very lucid and very together.
And the balance of power seemed to be shared. How was it shared between Andy, Don, and Brian?
Well, that was pretty interesting. It was like a three-way thing. Andy seemed to be, he was sort of, on top of everything. But Brian would interject the real musical things, and Don was more like the quality control, like overseer, and let's go fix this line and let's fix that line, So it was like, it was funny because there was a button you could pick up, with a cord on it for the talkback. You didn't have to reach over and push. They had a thing that would move all around the room, and they would take turns with it. Brian might have it for 10 minutes, Andy would have it for a little while, Don would have it for a little while. So it wasn't a situation where they would push the talkback and everybody would start talking and going, no, do it like that. It was like whoever had that thing had that little bit of control for that little time period, and then if they were working on something else that maybe one of the other guys had more of a feeling about what they wanted, then he would be the one with the talkback. It was very balanced.
So there's a sense of purpose here, though. There's some momentum going on here, right? I mean, we're moving towards a common goal, and everyone's kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah, that's the feeling I got when I first got there. I had this feeling like, now I know this is new. I know they haven't been in the studio long. Is this like an experiment, and is it all going to fall apart right here?
Right.
I mean, are they going to be able to do this? Because to be honest, some of the lines didn't sound like perfectly lined up phrasing wise, and even the tuning, every now and then, like when the guy was moving things around, you would hear a single track get pushed up louder than all the others, and you would hear like if Brian's voice was, a couple of tracks I heard Brian's voice solo or just louder in the mix than everything else, and it was like a little bit of pitchy stuff here and there, but when they put them all together, they sounded good. But it wasn't quite polished like the records sound yet, but you knew with what they had, they could get there with it,
Were they self-conscious at all? Did they appear to be self-conscious at all, or were they just all kind of into the work?
They were, Brian's always a little bit self-conscious.
Yeah.
But
how does that evidence itself?
Just, that his facial expression, he still looked a little bit, a little nervous here and there, but like I told Cindy, I said, I would have expected him to be like kind of sitting in his own world, and somebody would go, "Hey, Brian, how'd that sound?" And he'd go, "Yeah, I need a candy bar." That's the kind of thing I would have expected to see, but it wasn't like that at all. So his wife came at some point during this, and she had a little dog with her, and it was, she was kind of sitting near him. She was sitting on the floor next to him, I think, most of the time. And I talked to her quite a few times because we were right beside each other.
Did you introduce yourself, or?
So I think Cindy introduced me, and
did she know Cindy already?
No.
Did you ever find out what Cindy was talking to Audrey about?
No.
You should ask her.
But anyway, I asked his wife, how long have they been doing this? And she said they just started yesterday. And everybody kept talking about, after they finished Carl's lead vocal, they had a few more background things to do, but they kept talking about Mike Love, like, when's Mike getting here, because he had to come from San Francisco, and it was foggy, and apparently he was having problems getting there with the airport and everything. So they were, Brian was singing some low part that Mike was going to do, and Don was, yeah, can he do that? Or one of them asked him, either Don or Andy Paley, can he do that? And he goes, oh, yeah, he can do that, And Brian sang really low, like something you never hear him do. He like sang Mike Love's part.
And he kind of knows Mike Love's range, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess after 1,700 years, you would know.
So anyway, Carl finished his vocal, and they kept, like I said, asking about Mike Love. And at one point, Brian said, well, Mike's here. And everybody's like, he is? And I remember thinking, well, when did he see him? I don't even think he's been out of the room yet. But I guess maybe at one point he walked out and came back.
Did you say Audrey said something when he said
Yeah, well, this happened about 3 times that somebody would say, when's Mike coming? And Brian goes, he's here. He's got a blue coat on. I saw him. He's up, in the front somewhere. And so, then people were going out to look for him. And she goes, somebody please tell me that Mike is here. Like she was worried that Brian was having hallucinations or something. So finally somebody comes back and he goes, yeah, he is here. He's been here for like 20 minutes, some period. He had a really blue coat on, which Bruce Johnson made kind of a comment about.
And when did Bruce Johnson get in there?
I think it was during Carl's vocal. He just kind of wandered in.
And what's Bruce Johnson wearing? What's he look like?
He has shorts on. He looks like when you always see him. He's
right.
Shorts, and he had a Beach Boy baseball cap on, and
And what did he say
typical
about Mike Love's
Beach Boy
coat?
Oh, later on he said, yeah, Mike, he's got a blue coat, and I do mean blue. But
at some point, did Bruce Johnson come up to you?
Yeah, after he had been there about 10 minutes, and I was standing there in my pose like this, still standing.
Hey, hold on a second.
Still standing like this.
All right.
And he comes up and he walks like this to me, and he grabs my hands, and he goes, now this is the Reverend Brian Wilson is my God body language. And he goes, and he grabbed my hands and he pulled them apart. He goes, just relax and enjoy it. and then I laughed and we said something else. I forget what else,
That's pretty weird.
But it was it was kind of funny.
Right?
Yeah,
it
was totally dead on. So then, from that point, I felt kind of relieved, like it's okay if I'm here, and now it's like they're not going to throw us out, and I can just relax, and I don't have to worry too much about it. And probably the more relaxed I am, the more everybody else will be at ease, rather than who are these guys in the back room that are like.
Well, Cindy was relaxed, wasn't she?
Yeah, kind of. She was a little more relaxed than I was.
So Mike walks in. Does he say hi to everybody in the studio, or what?
He doesn't really come into the control room. He's like, there was a little bit of a vibe there because he didn't walk into the control room and say hi to anybody. He was just hanging outside the control room, and a couple of people would walk out and say thanks to him. But then before he was able to do his thing, they had another part they wanted to do. So Bruce Johnson, Carl, Al Jardine at that point had gotten there too. So now Al Jardine had been there for a little while. So when Mike came in, they were all there at the same time, which I guess is the first time on this project they've all been in the studio at the same time.
Right. Lord knows, maybe the first time in many years they've all been in the studio.
Maybe so. Yeah. I mean, they did do that song. There's a Baywatch song that they put together, but I don't know if they were all involved in it.
Right.
I was feeling like this might be the first time in years that they'd been in the studio together, working together. So Mike Love went down the hall to the lounge, and at some point I heard him mumble something, or he was talking to somebody, and he's like, I thought I was just going to get here and do my part and leave, and I'm kind of waiting around here. Typically what you might expect Mike Love to say in this situation. So anyway, Al Jardine's son, Bruce, and Carl, and Al Jardine himself went out, 4 of them around one microphone, and there was just some like whoa parts. that happened like in the chorus every 2 or 3 times it went around or whatever. And so they just went out there, and then one of the guys like Don was or somebody was out there with them, and I think Brian might have gone out there for a second, but they just came back into the control room and they were ready to sing their parts. And I think Brian said something to Carl about his, you're on this part, but all the other guys just kind of fell into place. They didn't work on it very long. The first couple of times when they rolled the tape and they did it like twice, it sounded like really bad, and everybody was like in the control room kind of laughing, and they were laughing. And then they did it again, and it was cool. And they went, yeah, that's it. And so they ran through. It was like at the end of the song, as the song's going, repeating the chorus, and this part comes up about every 4 bars, I guess it would come in. So they did that. They went back and doubled it.
How's their rapport with each other?
Good. Like they've been working together for a million years. I mean.
And what's the rapport between Brian and Mike?
Well, at this point, they weren't together yet. Brian was still in the control room. Mike hadn't come in there yet.
Okay.
So then they finished that, and they were. I think Mike was getting ready to go in there, and they were all out there talking about. Somebody mentioned Blondie Chaplin, who used to be in the Beach Boys a long time ago, and I think this is something Cindy told me. I heard him talking about him, but she said that she was closer to him than I was, and somebody asked, I think Carl said, yeah, Blondie's in town, maybe we should call him up and ask him to come down, and Brian didn't seem to want that. He said that brings back too many bad memories or something like that.
Huh.
Which, who knows, that was like around Holland that time, so maybe it reminded him of that period or something. But anyway, so then Mike Love was going to go sing.
How long have you been in there by this time?
Well, this is it's been about 2 hours, I guess.
And
because we were getting ready to leave, but I wanted to wait until Mike Love got there and actually sung something on the microphone so I could just see what was going to happen with him and Brian.
Did you get a sense of how long they had been in the studio before you got there?
No, not really.
Okay.
I would have guessed since maybe noon or something.
And you got there at
5:30.
Okay.
So Mike Love goes in and seems to pretty much know what they want him to do. I mean, I don't remember Brian ever actually singing the part to him, but it was like one of those kind of low answer parts, and and the other guys sing, and then he joins them kind of at the end of the phrase, and then adds his own little thing. And he went through it a couple of times and fiddled around with it, like, well, I'll sing this one, but I won't sing the second one, and I'll sing the third one, and I'll join in with them on the fourth, and he changed it a couple of times, adding his own little, like the more he sang it, he started getting ideas, and he said, oh, I thought I'd do this one little thing here, and they go, yeah, that's cool. But when he first went in there, and Brian was out there with him, and he was talking to Don about something about money, and he goes, how many projects do you have to produce to make that much money, or something like that. And then Brian started walking back in the control room, and Mike Love goes, well, I'm going to have to do a few more court cases to get that much money. And I turned around and looked at Brian's wife, and she was like, and it was like, oh no, is this going to be like, a tense thing? So Brian comes in and sits down, and they start getting ready to roll tape, and
just Mike in the studio and Brian.
Just Mike in the studio. He's the only one out there. Everybody else is, either in the hallway or in the control room.
Has Mike said anything like, "Well, this is going to be a good song" or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
He asked Brian, when did you write this song, Brian? And Brian goes, well, Andy wrote most of it, and Andy was like, oh, no, I didn't. It's like that, and but he goes, about 2 years ago, and he goes, about 2 years ago, huh? Well, has Brian Wilson retired from singing lead? I mean, and Brian's like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I just wondered why you threw it to Carl, because, like the Pet Sounds album is like almost all Brian Wilson. And it's just like these guys are like two guys who have grown up together since they were kids, but they're just picking on each other.
Is it playful picking or?
Well, I couldn't tell. It could have been either way.
How did Brian respond when Mike said that?
He didn't really respond very much, but at some point, like right after that, he goes, well, Mike, do you need to put on a Maharishi robe to do this track? And everybody started laughing in the control room. It's
How
kind
did
of
Mike take that?
he just kind of, passed it off. He didn't really say much.
Right.
So maybe it was just their way of kind of breaking the ice. Maybe they do that maybe they pick on each other that way.
And Mike's wearing a cap too, right?
Yeah, he had some baseball cap on. But so then they just did it, and then he started singing his part, and he went back and doubled it. Well, at one point before Mike went into the studio, and he wasn't in the control room either, Bruce said to it might have been the engineer he was talking to, or it might have been Andy. He said, "Now we don't need to triple track Mike's part for this." Meaning that we don't need to sing it 3 times. And somebody said, whoever he was talking to goes, "Oh, yeah, probably not. Too much personality, huh?" And he goes, "Well, you might get too much of his personality if you try to make him do that."
You don't know who the people are who said that?
That's what Bruce said to this guy. He said you might get too much of his personality. Meaning,
wow.
If you make him work too hard, he'll turn into whoever he.
So did you
whoever he
leave
turns
before
into.
Mike left?
Yeah. And at this point, it was getting a little bit late, so we were like, I was thinking we got to get going. But he, I was still there. He did his part, and he doubled his part, and they put it all together, and it sounded really good. And I walked back into the lounge. Cindy was sitting in the lounge with Carl, talking about this studio and what it used to be, because I think that studio that we were in used to be United Recorders, and next to it or down the street, not far away, was Western Recorders, which was where the Beach Boys recorded a lot of stuff,
right.
like Good Vibrations. Parts of that were done there. So they were just talking about that, and then some guy that was in there with us gave us directions on how to get to 15 if the fog was too bad, and Carl was just sitting back. He was talking, and then she asked him about the Beach Boys singing in the swimming pool. She said, "Did you guys use the swimming pool for an echo chamber, around the time of Smiley Smile?" She was asking him about that. He goes, "Well, we didn't really use it for an echo chamber, but we did lay down in the swimming pool." And Mike Love was in the room. He had walked in to get something, coffee or something, and he kind of was listening, and he made some comment or something. I forget.
Like what?
I forget what it was.
Like a little derogatory comment or a helpful comment?
No, it was more like a yeah. Those were pretty crazy times back then. Something like that.
Right.
And
so he's separate, sort of, from the rest of them, but it's funny because it seems almost like Mike is now the separate thing orbiting the rest of them as opposed to Brian.
That's definitely the impression I got. He's like the last standout, the last holdout for the unity of the whole thing. Everybody else was really cool,
And that you said there was kind of a chill when Mike Love showed up, kind of the vibe changed?
Well, that was just my impression. Not that I saw that happen. I just got that feeling because he didn't come into the control room, and he seemed to be just impatient. Like, let me do my part, and so I can go.
Did you get a sense of how Don helps the project? I mean, after having done, not Wilburys, but Stones and Dylan and all these amazing projects, what does he bring to a project?
Well, I don't know. He seemed to be letting it happen.
So maybe he's a good facilitator. He creates the ambience for people.
The whole thing, overall vibe was that everybody was happy to be at the stage they were at with this thing. Nobody was expecting anything, and that they knew they were treading on a very thin ice type situation. Like it's, every now and then, they would encourage each other. Andy would go, "Oh, it's going to be great, Brian," and they, would say, "Yeah, good, man, it sounds great." And it was like, just like every step of the way what they could achieve, they were happy being at that stage,
But it was more, you would imagine other people in a situation like that, it would be kind of brittle and feeling of, oh no, I'm going to fall, but this was more of a good vibrations, kind of an enthusiastic thing with maybe a slight undercurrent of tension.
Right. Yeah, like I said, Don was just sort of there. He didn't say a whole lot except when something was technically not right.
Why do you think they let you guys stay there for 2.5 hours?
I don't know. Maybe because Andy knew Cindy, and you know, it's not like we actually came there with the purpose of coming into a session. I mean, we had been next door mastering with Bernie, heard they might be next door. She knew, you know, David Leaf and knew Andy Paley.
Just
so
visiting, basically, just
yeah,
kind of hanging out.
just kind of hanging out, and I'm sure that's probably happened in the past, and that maybe things were just going nice and smooth, so there was no real reason to close the doors and keep out outsiders, you know.
Okay, so you're in the lobby now. Is that on your way out?
Yeah.
Okay, so you just walk out the door after that.
Yeah, the last thing we did was when I was in the lobby. The lobby was back behind. It was further back than the studio itself was, so it was further away from the front door of the whole place. But anyway, we just, you know, I said goodbye to Carl and shook my hand. Said nice to meet you, Mike, because he had introduced himself to me earlier. Him and Bruce are the only two that really talked to. I think Al Jardine did too.
Right.
But so we left. We didn't go back to the control room. And when we were outside getting ready to, you know, we were outside the control room and between the control room and the lobby. Andy was there, and he said, you know, he shook hands and, you know, said, nice to meet you. And I said, well, thanks a lot. And I think earlier he had asked me what connection I had to Cindy. He asked me if I played on a record. And I said, no, I co-produced and engineered a record. He goes, oh, cool. So then he said, you know, I said, we have to take off. And he said, nice to meet you. And I said, thanks a lot. And
you told me you really enjoyed the session, or did you?
I just said, thanks a lot. It was great. You know,
Yeah.
Sounds great. I told him that a couple of times. And he goes, well, you know, it's the Beach Boys.
So,
So that was it. We walked out, went out the
how
front door.
significant was this event to you?
Well, you know.
Well, say it.
It was a dream. It was unbelievable. I mean, who gets to sit in on a Beach Boys session, especially a reunion session with Brian helping produce? You know, now it could fall apart tomorrow. They might say, I can't work with Mike Love, or, you know, we just can't get along. I mean, who knows? It'd be a miracle if it actually comes to a finished album.
Well, I guess the worst case is they could fill it with the usual Beach Boys filler and then just use those two cuts, you know, like they do.
Yeah, or it could turn into a Brian Wilson solo album with a few songs having Beach Boys singing on it, because these are Brian's songs with Andy Paley.
Okay. Describe the first song. What does it sound like?
Well, the first song, I can't really remember how it goes, but it sounded like a Sunflower era. I don't know why I think that, but that's just what it reminded me of.
And the second song?
Second song was like a 50s R&B
and the second song
ballad,
Mr.
Soul Searching.
And the first one was called?
The first one's called She's a Mystery, or Mystery to Me.
Okay.
Something like that. I think She's a Mystery.
And Soul Searching sounds like?
Soul Searching my
Okay, but it's like another...
like Good Timing.
All right. So do you want to play that, and then you can say how it sounds different?
Yeah, play a little bit of Good Timing. It's basically the same rhythm track. I mean, you could take all the voices off. In fact, while we were there, Andy Paley went in and added this piano, the triplet piano fill that goes through any of these songs, which was, when he played his piano track, Don wasn't even in the control room, didn't have a thing to say about it, came back and said, well, is he done with his piano? And everybody goes, yeah. And he goes, oh, I thought you were just getting sounds. So it was like they were very trusting of each other.
So it's real casual.
Yeah.
It's almost like not a forced, but a deliberate casualness.
Right.
What else? Is there anything else you can tell us about this one?
That's, obviously the vocals are different, but Carl was singing lead. And where they're saying Good Time, and if you replace it with the word Soul Searching, same rhythm feel, that's pretty much how it was. And Mike Love was going, he would go, soul searching my soul, singing that low part.
You were saying at some points they were doing punch-ins with, was it Carl's lead vocal on the first song when he was doing the different
on this song? Yeah, Carl's lead vocal.
The second knew exactly where to go.
Yeah, the second was right on top of everything. I mean,
talk about the punch-in, the Carl exclamations.
Yeah, that was like on the fade out of the song. He would be interjecting these little ad-lib phrases, and the background was just the same thing repeating over and over. So the only way you knew really where you were in the song was what his previous ad-lib had been. And so, they'd be listening, and then they'd go, no, let's go back and get that one, and the guy would rewind exactly to the right spot and play it, and they'd punch in and get it. And it was very impressive, because a couple of times it got a little bit confusing because they weren't sure which one did he say before the other one.
Right.
And I guess he had them written down, but I don't know if he was doing them exactly in the order. He had these are the phrases you can choose from kind of a thing.
Right.
And so he was just saying what he felt like saying. But
I see. So they actually written little ad-lib.
They had written ad-lib lines, yeah. It was on his paper.
Yeah.
But I think he was just kind of choosing which one he wanted to say at any one time.
And this was the thing that turned around every 4 bars?
Yeah. So the engineer, of all the people in the room, the engineer was just like, he was moving a few things around, but the second was actually a guy who looked like he was on the hot seat. He was in the position of making any mistake that might have been made.
Now, something you said earlier intrigued me. You said this could blow up at any time. This could be over.
Well, that's because that's how the Beach Boys are. I mean, it's
But it's not necessarily the impression that you got. I mean, didn't you get more of a strength?
Yeah, more. It was much more of a positive impression. Like when Al was leaving, he said, Brian goes, well, I hope we can get back together and do this again. Obviously it wasn't going to happen the next day. This was like a 2-day thing. So they weren't scheduled to come in tomorrow. At least the guys weren't coming in based on what he said. And Al goes, oh man, it's no problem. Don's going to coordinate all our schedules and it's going to, it's going to happen. That's what he said. So
does it make you want to go back up?
Well, I wouldn't really have a way in.
Cindy?
Cindy said she might go back.
Did you tell her to tell you?
No, I don't know if I'd want to go back again.
Just like the Beatles thing, right?
Well, I mean, I've got my taste, and they let me. I mean, I don't have any reason to be there. Next time, it would be like, trying to weasel your way back into something that you were lucky enough to get in the first time.
So.
But you never know. I mean, if Cindy talked to Andy and he said, come on up. Oh, the other thing they said was that they were going to go to Don Was' home studio after this. So they may not be at Ocean Way.
Okay.
Cindy said in the past that Andy has told her that, like, when they were working probably on these songs earlier, though, when it was Mark Lynette's studio and Andy and Brian, that he had invited her a couple of times to come up there, and she would call him, and like the one time she called him, and he goes, oh yeah, they might, well, let me talk to Brian. And he asked Brian, and Brian goes, no, tonight's not a good night. So it was like, depending on Brian's mood, whether outside people would come in, because Brian apparently gets pretty nervous when somebody he doesn't know is around.
Did you get that impression that you were making him nervous at all?
I don't know, I mean, a couple of times he just looked at me, but, I couldn't bring it to myself to, I probably should have just said, hi, I'm Mike Harris, nice to meet you, that sounds really good, but it was more like, I was a little too overcome with, a little too in awe, really, because it was like he was walking by and he just kind of looked at me and, keep going.
So you would have had to insert yourself into the action to a degree in order to do that. Yeah, I understand that. And this is before Bruce separated your hands?
No, it was probably afterwards. It was just in the course of the whole thing.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you need that we haven't talked about? You can look at your cheat sheet if you want.
Oh yeah, let me see if there's any other anecdote.
We've been going for a while here, too.
Yeah, I know. I think we've pretty much got everything.
So let me ask you this.
Yep, everything I had I've said.
Where?
Oh, there was one other funny thing. At one point when Carl came up to introduce himself to me, Brian was sitting right here next to me. I was standing, but he was right there. And this was around the time when they were talking about Mike Love and when's Mike Love going to, come in. And Carl goes, "Hi, my name's Carl." And I go, "My name's Mike." And right when I said that, Brian goes, "Mike! Mike!" And he looks out the control room door and he starts yelling, "Mike!" And they go, "No, different Mike."
Oh yeah, he was listening as hell.
That was the only thing that happened like that, though.
Huh. So, how would you? I'm getting back to your gut feelings on this thing. How would you place this event among the things that you've been privileged to see and do in your life? I mean, how significant was this event to you?
Oh, it was pretty significant. I mean, it was
top 10 significant things that ever happened to you?
Oh yeah, definitely. From a musical standpoint, it's right up there with meeting Zappa. But it was better because I didn't force myself into a,
You've
a home situation.
You have more finesse now.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a once in a lifetime thing. Hopefully, it will turn into a new Beach Boy album, and everybody will be, back together and happy.
Yay. Anything else?
Nope. Bye.